Waiters, have you ever had to call the cops on your table? I was working at this family restaurant when this dad brought his two kids in for dinner. At first, everything seemed normal. The kids ordered chicken nuggets. Dad got a burger, typical Tuesday night stuff. But then I started noticing weird things. The dad would cut the kids' food into tiny pieces, even though they looked like they were maybe 8 and 10 years old. He'd test every bite with his finger before letting them eat it. When the 8-year-old asked for ketchup, the dad said no because it had too much sugar. The kid just nodded and went back to eating plain nuggets. I thought he was just a health-conscious parent. My manager, Janet, was always telling us about customers with special diets. But then, the 10-year-old asked if she could go to the bathroom. The dad said she had to wait until they got home. She looked uncomfortable but didn't argue. 20 minutes later, she asked again. This time, the dad got angry and whispered something that made her eyes fill with tears. She sat perfectly still after that, like she was afraid to move. I started paying more attention to their table. The dad controlled everything. He told them when to drink water, how to sit, even how to hold their forks. When the younger kid accidentally dropped a nugget, the dad made him pick it up and eat it anyway. The kid looked embarrassed, but did it without complaining. I'd been waiting tables for 3 years and had seen strict parents before, but this felt different. These kids weren't just well-behaved. They were scared. They kept glancing at their dad before doing anything, even scratching their nose or shifting in their chair. The dad never smiled or talked to them like they were his children. He gave orders like they were soldiers. Sit up straight. Chew slower. Don't touch your face. The kids followed every command instantly. No normal kid is that obedient. When I brought their check, I heard the dad say, "If you embarrass me again like last time, you know what happens when we get home." The kids nodded quickly, looking terrified. My stomach dropped. I'd heard that tone before from my own stepdad when I was little. I went to the kitchen and told Janet what I was seeing. She came out to refill their water and observed the table for a few minutes. When she came back, her face was pale. She said we needed to call someone, but she wasn't sure who. The dad paid in cash and started gathering the kids to leave. The 10-year-old was limping slightly as they walked toward the door. That's when I noticed she had a bruise on her arm that hadn't been there when they sat down. Actually, it had been there. I just hadn't seen it under her long sleeves until she reached for something. Janet made the call while I watched them through the window. The dad was gripping both kids' shoulders really tight as they walked to his car. The kids moved like robots. No talking, no normal kid behavior, just following orders. The police arrived 15 minutes later. They caught up with the car 2 blocks away. Turns out the dad wasn't even their real father. He'd taken them from their mom's house during what was supposed to be a supervised visit. The kids hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. The mom showed up at the restaurant later that night, crying and thanking us over and over. She said the kids had been trained to act perfect in public so no one would ask questions. The dad had threatened them with worse punishments if anyone found I was working at a family restaurant when a dad came in with his 2 kids for dinner. At first, everything seemed normal. The kids ordered chicken nuggets, the dad got a burger. Pretty typical Tuesday night. But then I started noticing odd things. The dad cut the kids' food into tiny pieces, even though they looked mature enough to eat on their own, maybe 8 and 10 years old. He tested every bite with his finger before letting them eat it. When the younger one asked for ketchup, he refused because it had too much sugar. The kid quietly nodded and went on eating plain nuggets. At first, I thought he was just health conscious. My manager Janet often told us about parents with strict diets. But then the older child asked to go to the bathroom. The dad said no, they had to wait until they got home. The kid looked uncomfortable but said nothing. 20 minutes later, she asked again. This time, the dad whispered something that made her eyes fill with tears. After that, she sat perfectly still like she didn't dare move. I began watching their table closely. The dad controlled everything, when they drank water, how they sat, how they held forks. When the younger kid dropped a nugget, the dad made him pick it up and eat it. The kid looked embarrassed but obeyed without complaint. I'd been waiting tables for years and had seen strict parents, but this was different. These kids weren't just well-behaved, they were scared. They frequently glanced at their dad before doing anything, like tiny soldiers taking orders. The dad never smiled or talked like a father, just barked orders. Sit up straight. Chew slower. Don't touch your face. The kids obeyed instantly. No normal children are that obedient. When I brought the check, I overheard the dad say, "If you embarrass me again like last time, you know what happens at home." The kids nodded, terrified. My stomach dropped. That tone was familiar, from my own abusive past. I told Janet what I saw. She came out to refill their water and observed quietly. When she returned, her face was pale. She said we needed to call someone but wasn't certain who. Just then, the dad paid cash and gathered the kids to leave. The older girl was limping slightly, and I noticed a bruise on her arm, not visible at first under her sleeves. Janet made the call. I watched through the window as the dad gripped both kids' shoulders tightly while they walked robotically to the car, silent, obedient. Police arrived 15 minutes later and caught the car 2 blocks away. Turned out this dad wasn't their real father. He'd taken them during a supposed supervised visit with their mom. They hadn't had a real meal in 2 days. Later that night, the mom came to the restaurant crying and thanking us over and over. She explained the kids had been trained to appear perfect in public so no one would question or intervene. The dad had threatened worse punishments if anyone found out. The experience shook me to my core. Sometimes, the most ordinary nights reveal terrifying truths, and as waiters, we might be the only lifeline some children have. Story. When I got divorced, my own family didn't just take my ex-wife's side. They practically replaced me with her. They invited her to Thanksgiving and told me, "You can come as long as you keep your mouth shut and don't pull one of your pathetic scenes." I said, "Don't worry. I'd rather eat with strangers than sit with traitors." 3 days later, I made one move that blew everything up. My cousin called me sobbing. Everything's falling apart. Help. Chapter 1. Thanksgiving Betrayal. The house smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies. The kind of scent that should have felt like home. But that night, as I stepped into my parents' dining room, it felt more like walking into enemy territory. My daughter Emily clutched my hand tightly. "Dad, why are you so quiet?" she whispered. I forced a smile. "Just taking it all in, sweetheart." At the long oak table, everyone was already seated. My ex-wife sat at the head, laughing with my cousins as if she'd been born into the family. My own chair, the one I had sat in for 35 years of Thanksgivings, wasn't there. Instead, there was a single extra seat set for her. My mother glanced at me and quickly looked away as if ashamed, but not enough to do anything about it. My father cleared his throat, poured wine into her glass, and raised it high. "To family," he declared, "to those who matter." Glasses clinked. My ex smiled smugly, slipping her arm through my cousin's as if she belonged. When I tried to step closer, my brother stopped me with a hand on my chest. His wife smirked and said, "You can come as long as you keep your mouth shut and don't pull one of your pathetic scenes." A few chuckles echoed around the table. My ex didn't even look at me. She was too busy basking in her new role as the golden child. I swallowed hard, every muscle screaming to shout, to rage, to demand why my own blood had turned on me. But Emily's grip on my hand reminded me what dignity looked like. So I smiled faintly, nodded once, and said quietly, "Don't worry. I'd rather eat with strangers than sit with traitors." Then I turned, led my daughter out the door, and into the cold night. Behind us, the laughter faltered. But I didn't look back because in that moment, a fire lit inside me. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking towards something far greater. They thought they'd replaced me. They had no idea what was coming. Chapter 2, Cutting Ties. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with Emily eating cereal while my phone buzzed with group chat notifications. Photos from Thanksgiving, smiling faces. My ex holding my niece on her lap, captions that read, "Family is everything." Not one message asking where I'd gone. Not one check-in. I stared at the screen, then quietly deleted myself from every family group chat. Facebook, WhatsApp, Messenger, gone. Emily looked up. "Dad, are you mad at Grandma and Grandpa?" I forced a smile. "Not mad, sweetheart. Just learning who really stands by us." When I dropped her at school, I made a stop on the way home at the bank. A single signature cut off every joint account I'd ever allowed my parents and siblings to touch. I'd been too generous for too long, paying bills, covering debts, funding vacations. No more. Then I called my lawyer. "Draw it up," I said. "Draw what up?" he asked. "New wills, new ownership papers. Everything I control is going to bypass my family completely. If they don't want me, they don't get a dime." He whistled low. "That's going to sting." I leaned back in my chair, imagining my father pouring champagne at next year's Thanksgiving, only to realize the roof over his head no longer belonged to him. "They fired the first shot," I said quietly. "Now I'm just finishing the war." Because what they didn't know was that my father's company, the one they all relied on, was still under my partial ownership through a trust he'd forgotten I co-signed years ago. And with a single move, I could unravel their entire illusion of control. Chapter 3: The Trap. The first domino fell on a quiet Monday morning. I was sipping coffee when my phone buzzed, not from family, but from the manager of my father's company. "Mr. Carter," he said nervously. "We just received a legal notice. It says you filed to exercise your controlling stake." I smiled. "That's correct." He hesitated. "Sir, your father told everyone the company was his alone. They'll be upset. Then it's time they learned the truth. See, years ago, when my father had begged me to invest in his business expansion, I'd quietly taken 35% ownership, held through a trust in my daughter's name. He'd dismissed it as legal jargon. But it wasn't, it was leverage. And now, by activating my rights, every major decision from payroll to property sales needed my signature. By noon, my sister had texted, "Sister, what the hell are you doing? You're ruining Thanksgiving all over again." Me? No, I'm just making sure the parasites stop feasting on what I built. That night, I received a flurry of emails from board members. Some panicked, some angry. My father's empire had cracks, and the news of my sudden authority spread like wildfire. But I wasn't done, not yet. I called my cousin, the one who'd smirked at Thanksgiving as my ex-wife took my place at the table. He worked in accounting for the company. "Pull everything," I told him. "Every shady loan, every unauthorized payout, every personal expense they've buried in the books. If they want to play family against me, let's see how the shareholders feel when the skeletons come tumbling out." He hesitated. "That could sink the whole company." "Exactly," I said coldly. "Let them watch everything they stole burn to ash, because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about teaching them what it felt like to be betrayed by the people you trusted most." And soon the entire family would be begging for the seat at the table they once denied me. Chapter 4: The Collapse at the Dinner Table. Sunday dinner at my parents' house used to mean laughter, stories, and my mother's roast chicken. Now it felt like walking into enemy territory. I arrived late on purpose. My ex-wife's car was already parked in the driveway, and through the window I could see her laughing at the table with my family. My family, like she belonged there. When I stepped inside, the room fell quiet for a beat before my father barked, "If you're here to cause drama, leave." I smiled calmly and sat down. "Relax, I won't be long." My sister crossed her arms. "Good, because this is a family dinner. Real family." I almost laughed. "Funny you say that, because in about 30 seconds, you're going to wish you had never uttered those words." Before they could respond, my phone buzzed with a scheduled notification right on cue. Every device at the table, my father's, my mother's, even my ex's, lit up with an incoming email. They looked down, confused, then pale. It was the audit report, the one my cousin had compiled with every shady loan, every embezzled dime, every falsified expense tied to their names, forwarded not just to them, but also to the company's shareholders, the IRS and the local paper's business desk. My father slammed the table. "What the hell did you do?" I leaned back. "Me? Nothing. I just shared the truth. Transparency, you know. Isn't that what real family is supposed to value?" My mother's hand shook as she scrolled. This will ruin us." "That's the point," I said coldly. My ex-wife opened her phone, expecting to gloat. But her smile faded instantly, because tucked in the same email chain was her little secret, the luxury condo lease she'd been billing to the company under consulting expenses. Her golden image as the perfect ex-daughter-in-law shattered in front of everyone. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of Ethan, my nephew, whispering, "Mom, what does this mean?" I stood, sliding my chair back slowly. "It means Thanksgiving won't be at this house anymore. It means the days of mocking me while you feast on what isn't yours are over." And as I walked out, the chaos behind me erupted. Shouts, crying, phones ringing off the hook. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outcast. I felt like the executioner. Chapter 5: The Fallout. By Monday morning, the story had exploded. The Business Journal ran the headline, "Family-Owned Company Implodes Amid Fraud, Nepotism, and Scandal." The details from the audit spread like wildfire. Investors pulled out overnight. Vendors froze contracts and regulators opened investigations. The once proud company that my father built was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. Lies they'd mocked me for refusing to be part of. Calls poured into their phones, not from friends offering support, but from lawyers, creditors, and reporters digging for more. My cousin texted me at dawn. It's chaos here. Uncles screaming at everyone. Aunts crying nonstop. Your ex is being thrown under the bus by mom. They're blaming her for everything. This is insane. Meanwhile, my ex-wife's downfall came even faster. Her condo lease scandal hit social media. Pictures of her secret luxury life were plastered everywhere alongside screenshots of her lectures about being a loyal family woman. The hypocrisy stank. Even her own allies, the same ones who had once sneered at me during holidays, publicly distanced themselves. The perfect daughter-in-law mask had cracked beyond repair. But the most satisfying blow came that evening when I got a frantic call from my brother. "You ruined us," he spat. "The company's being seized. Dad says it's all your fault." I let him rant, then said evenly, "No, you ruined yourselves. I just stopped covering for you." And then I hung up. That night, as I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, my phone buzzed again. This time, a message from my mother. Not insults, not demands, just 3 words. "We need you." I didn't reply because for the first time in years, I finally felt free. Chapter 6, the final lesson. 3 weeks later, the dust had settled. The company was gone. The properties repossessed, and the family name, once flaunted at every country club dinner, now whispered like a curse. My ex-wife had vanished from social media. My brother was facing lawsuits. My parents avoided the neighbors by sneaking out at night. But me, I was finally free of them. One evening, my daughter came over with takeout. She had been the only one who never judged me, the only one who saw through their poison. We sat on the porch sharing dumplings when she said quietly, "Dad, I'm glad you walked away when you did. They always made you look weak, but you were the only strong one." Her words hit me harder than any applause from strangers ever could. Because in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge hadn't just been about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself, about refusing to sit at a table where I wasn't respected, about teaching my daughter and myself that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. I had left their house empty-handed. Now they were the ones empty. And me, I had peace, dignity, and the satisfaction of knowing they'd never recover from the lesson I left behind. When you betray the one person who covered for you, don't be surprised when he stops and lets the world see who you really are. I raised my glass of tea to the night sky and whispered to freedom. For the first time in years, it felt like a real toast. Epilogue. The long game. A year later, I was sitting in a quiet cafe reviewing a new project proposal. Business was going well. Better than ever, actually. Without the constant weight of family politics and betrayal, I had space to grow, think, and build. That's when my cousin, the same one who once called me sobbing when everything collapsed, walked in. He looked nervous, carrying a coffee he hadn't touched. He slid into the seat across from me and whispered, They still talk about you, you know. They say you ruined them. They say you destroyed the family." I smiled faintly. "Funny. I say they destroyed themselves." I just stepped out of the way. He looked at me, eyes wide, then nodded slowly. "You know, I think you're right. They needed someone to blame because facing the truth was too hard." I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm. Blame is easy. Responsibility is harder. They never learned the difference. And that's why they lost. As he left, I sat with that thought because deep down, I knew my true revenge wasn't just that they lost money, houses, and status. It was that they'd spend the rest of their lives haunted by the fact that the person they mocked, rejected, and betrayed was the one who came out whole. And me, I wasn't just whole. I was free. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Tell us what you think about this story in the comments below. Like the story if you think this story is justified. Share it with someone who needs this energy.